we're asked to simplify 9p to the 2/3, all of that over the square root of 4p cubed. So let's just do this step by step. The first thing we can do is say, well, if it's 9p to the 2/3, that's the same thing as 9 to the 2/3 times p to the 2/3. That's what this top part can be simplified to. Now the bottom part, we can rewrite the bottom part right here. The square root of 4p to the third, this is the exact same thing as 4p to the third to the 1/2 power. This is the same thing. The square root of 4p to the third is the same thing as 4p to the third to the 1/2 power. So given that, we can do the same thing that we did on the numerator. We can say, well, this is the same thing as 4 to the 1/2, 4 to the 1/2 times p to the third to the 1/2 times p to the third to the 1/2 power. Now let's see if we can simplify this even more. So this is going to be equal to, let's do the denominator first here. So what's 4 to the 1/2 power? What's the principal root of 4? Well, 2 squared is 4, so it's 2. The positive root is 2. And then p to the third, and then that to the 1/2. That's the same thing as p to the 3 times 1/2, or p to the 3/2. P to the 3 over 2. 9 to the 2/3. See, the cube root of 9 isn't anything easy. Well, actually, we could think about it this way. You could say it's 9 squared. So we can view 9 to the 2/3. Let me do it this way. This is the best way to think about it. This 9 to the 2/3, one could write it. I'm kind of making it, unsimplifying it, but it'll help us calculate it, what it actually means. 9 to the 2/3 is the same thing as 9 squared to the 1/3 power, right? Because 2 times 1/3 is 2/3. And then you have that, of course, times p to the 2/3. And this is going to be equal to 9 squared is 81. So it's 81 to the 1/3 power times p to the 2/3 times p to the 2/3. Now, instead of writing this 2 and this p to the 3/2 down here, let me just write it as negative exponents. Or even, let's just write it like this. A 2 in the denominator is the same thing as 2 to the negative 1, or 1/2. So this right here, if I want to write in the numerator, same thing as 1/2. That and that are the same thing. And p to the 3/2 in the denominator is the same thing as p to the negative p to the negative 3/2. So this whole expression so far has been simplified to this right over here. And let me copy and paste it. I'll work on the next line now. So let me copy it and paste. Bring it down right over there. Let's see if we can simplify this even more. So let's think about 81. Let's see if we can write it as, well, essentially when we take something to the cube, when we take the cube root of something, when we take something to the 1/3 power, we're taking the cube root of it. So we have to find some numbers, or maybe we can factor it into things that do have cube roots and other things that don't. So 81 is, well, it's divisible by 3. It's 3 times 27, which is 3 times 9, which is 3 times 3. So 81 is 3 to the 4th power, or it's 3 multiplied by itself 3 times. So we could rewrite this 81 to the 1/3. We could rewrite it as 3 times 3 times 3 to the, well, I'll write it like this, times 3 to the 1/3. That's the same thing as 81. And then let's think about these p's. And I'm doing more steps than I would do if I had to do it on a piece of paper, because I really want y'all to understand kind of what's going on here. So we have a p to the 2/3 times p to the negative 3/2. So that's going to be times p to the 2/3 minus 3/2 power. And then, so we did the p's, and then we just have the times 1/2. Times 1/2. Now, this right over here, this is the same thing. This is the same thing as, we could just view this as 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So it's the same thing as 3 times 3 times 3 to the 1/3 times 3 to the 1/3. Right? We've done this multiple times. Times the 2/3 minus 3/2. Let's just work that out. Actually, 3/2 is a larger number, so let's just say it's the negative of 3/2 minus 2/3, which is equal to the negative, if we use 6 as a common denominator. If we use 6 as a common denominator, 3/2 with 6 as a denominator is 9/6. minus 4 over 6. That's what 2/3 is equal to. So 9 minus 4 is 5/6, but then we have this negative out here, so it equals negative 5/6. So times p to the negative 5/6 power times 1/2, times that last 1/2 over here. Now, 3 times 3 times 3, or 27 to the 1/3. The cube root of 27 is 3. So this right here simplifies to 3. And then 3 to the 1/3, that's the cube root of 3. So we can say 3, and then this right here is the cube root of 3. The cube root of 3. So we get 3 times the cube root of 3 times p to the negative 5/6. So sometimes you might want to write the p out here in front of the radical. That tends to be a simpler way. Actually, let me do that. So I'll write the p to the negative 5/6, p to the negative 5/6. Then I'll write the radical. So times the cube root of 3, and then all of that times 1/2. Or we could say all of that multiplying times 1/2, or you could just divide it by 2. And we've simplified it about as far as you can go. You could view it as 3/2. You could say 3/2 is 1.5 p to the negative 5/6 times the cube root of 3. If you wanted to, you could calculate the cube root of 3, multiply that times 1/2, give you some decimal number, times p to the negative 5/6. And that's about as simplified as this thing can get.